Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
Hey, another Paranoid American podcast. I want to say it's like a special episode, but every episode's special, right? We're all special snowflakes. But I do have a really interesting guest today that I don't think you've seen before. He hasn't really been on the conspiracy circuit, at least among the small little network that you might know me out of. So welcome aboard to Mason, who is basically a neurologist, right? And a hypnotist, a self-proclaimed hypnotist that also is a mind control expert. And I know that term is a little bit charged, especially within like official realms. But first of all, thanks for coming aboard. And if there's any place that you want people to go and like you got books or if you got articles or anything, just plugs up front.
Sure. So I am in the process of writing a book. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Behavioral Decryption Institute. Behavioral Decryption Institute. It is a small company that I just recently started, a research company that is based around what we're going to be talking about today, this idea that mind control is real, and it is a loaded and charged word. But seeing what we can do about it and bring it to the public sphere. For my income personally, I train people using these techniques, mostly salesmen, every once in a while, like a politician who wants to get into like state Congress or whatever. But generally speaking, it is people who want to upgrade their life, be better with social skills, be better at communicating, persuasion, influence, and people reading. So that is kind of my overarching thing. Hypnosis is what I got started into. I started hypnotizing people when I was 14 years old. This was not something that I kind of thought I was going to go down this path of being a brain researcher and studying all these mind control techniques. I really wanted to be a professional magician to start. I was a bomb card guy. I was really good at card tricks.
Didn't we all, man? We all wanted to be magicians, right?
Yeah, we watched that David Blaine special and we're like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And when I was 14, I picked up this DVD set called The Manchurian Candidate. And it was this old hypnosis, not The Manchurian Approach by Anthony Jacquin, who's a hypnotist over in the UK. And he kind of walked you step by step on how to hypnotize someone start to finish. He had several DVDs out. And I watched the whole DVD in like one sitting. I went out and to my school and hypnotized someone the first day. And I was very lucky that it worked because it doesn't always work your first time. And if it doesn't work your first time, you lose confidence. You don't want to do it, but it worked and it kept working for me. And that became a passion of mine. So I started doing some stage hypnosis shows ended up going to college for psychology, ended up hating psychology. I like, not as a field in itself, but the college classes, you get down to the end of the semester and you're like, I learned a bunch of theory, but there's nothing I can pull from this. So neuroscience became one of my big loves. And I understand that there's a lot of beliefs out there. We will be talking about evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology a little bit through this. If you don't believe in evolution, it's like playing with fairies with your daughter. If you have a daughter who's like, let's go play princess, you either have to truly believe she's a princess or you have to pretend, and it's more fun that way. So if you don't believe in evolution, just stick with me, pretend like it is. And I think it's a really good model to see the world through. And it gives a lot of insight on how humans work.
Are we just talking about NLP when you say that you've got like techniques that you can kind of like train people for success? Is it NLP? And if not, like what is it beyond NLP?
So NLP was the start of this whole system of thinking that the brain is able to be programmed. And that's not actually completely true either. NLP was paved with good intentions, but unfortunately, a lot of NLP doesn't work, mainly because first, it was the first of its kind. No one had tried this stuff before. Richard Bandler and John Grinder had really paved the way, with Virginia Satir, Milton Erickson. They had paved the way, and it wasn't perfect right off the bat. Where NLP fell into trouble was it was basically like source code. It was like anyone can modify it and add books. So you pick up an NLP book, you don't even know, one, if it works, two, if it's effective, three, if it is based in the guys who actually have studied NLP. I could know nothing about NLP, write a book, put NLP on the title, and sell 1 million copies just because it has NLP in it. So NLP is not what we're talking about specifically, but there are pieces of NLP, specifically when they talk about linguistic hypnosis, conversational hypnosis, that they pulled from Milton Erickson that are effective. The basics of NLP, the Milton model, the meta model, are not the worst things on the planet, but that's not really what I'm getting into. I prefer the idea, because that's mainly used for therapy more than anything else. It is not the subtly putting things in your mind, Darren Brown style that people think it is. NLP does not have that effect on people. There are a lot more effective ways to control people, control humans. And most of that, it boils down to evolutionary biology. So
you invoked the name of Darren Brown. I just want to know what is it that he's doing in particular, if that's not necessarily NLP. And with the preface that I've got a little bit of bias just because I didn't really believe in NLP or hypnosis beyond like people that wanted to play along until I saw Darren Brown's special, and he literally hypnotized me through the TV screen and had me like think of things, and then and then like shows you in reverse, like, okay, here's how it happened. And I understand that he doesn't show you everything, but he said, oh, this is just NLP. And that's when I was like, oh, what's that? And that kind of started my journey. But I realized, like you're saying, the NLP that I end up learning about is more of like, how do you sell this widget to this customer based on the language they're using and like the tonality? Like you kind of like match energy. It's more about like rapport building than like planting a specific idea in your head and like making you say something that you wouldn't have otherwise said. So what is that thing? Is that just hypnosis?
Yeah. So, and this is total respect to Darren Brown. He is, in my opinion, the greatest entertainer ever to live. I don't think anyone beats him. His new special, Showman, literally, I was crying at the end of it. It was.
I didn't even know there was a new one out.
Yeah, it is beautiful, beautiful work. I will, because obviously it's not my place to expose like actual secrets. NLP has nothing to do with what Darren Brown does. Nothing. It is a brilliant piece of show, because it was so popular when Darren Brown got famous in the early 2000s. It was very, very popular. People were going to these seminars. Richard Bandler and John Grinder were superstars, and it hadn't been debunked for the most part back then. And so this idea that someone's really, really good at it can put thoughts in your head, pick thoughts out of your head, was spectacular. I always like to say this with Darren Brown: if you think he's doing hypnosis, he's doing a magic trick. If you think he's doing a magic trick, he's doing hypnosis. It is brilliantly done. It is so paved. A lot of the TV specials, you can't see some of the pre-work that goes into a lot of these things. But
how real are some of those? Like on a scale from 1 to 10, like I'll give you a specific one, assuming you've seen like his TV specials. There was one in particular where he like hypnotizes people into thinking that they're inside of like an actual zombie apocalypse because they like play some game and he flashes lights. And I know a lot of that's like showmanship aspect, but then they get into this state where they kind of black out and someone like drags them into like a whole fabricated little area, and then they like snap him back to, and the guy actually thinks that he's like shooting zombies and stuff and like scared for his life. Like how real is that in terms of like a real person was hypnotized and is doing that, you know?
Yeah. So I've seen exactly what you're talking about. That is extremely real, extremely realistic. The only criticism on that is you're not going to be hypnotized through an arcade game. There's no Phobias. It's not that you play a game, you go into a trance. There was some pre-show there. There was something, he hypnotized them beforehand, and you can give amnesia in hypnosis super easily. It is something, it's one of the first things that a lot of people learn to do is, you know, if you count your fingers, you forget the number 7. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you hypnotize them. You say you've forgotten the number 7. It's completely gone from your mind. You wake them up. You have them count their fingers again. And you can see videos of this online. And they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. And then they're like, what happened? Because they've forgotten the number 7. They can't pronounce it. They can't say it. That's not even in their head. And so total amnesia is something that is definitely possible. And I've done before. You can, if you really want to mess with someone, you hypnotize them, and then you say, you've forgotten everything. You've forgotten your name, your place, your country. You don't know who you are. You've forgotten everything. And then you wake them up and you watch them, and they just, and you'll talk to them, and they'll be like you'll say, how do you feel? And they won't even say anything. They'll just, because their brain has been wiped for that moment.
What if you just get up and leave the room and never come back at that point?
It'll return. It'll return after a certain amount of time. Different for everyone, but
is there a chance that it doesn't, or is that impossible?
Unless that is your goal. So if your goal is to wipe a human being, you would have to do extensive hypnotherapy sessions. And you would likely have to have them cared for, because about midway through, they probably wouldn't be able to function in life anymore. They would still remember some things, but they wouldn't be able to function. So you would have to keep them under supervision. But if you wanted to do something like that where it's permanent, it would probably take around 16 hours of hypnotherapy. So for an average subject. So if you were doing 4-hour sessions a day, yeah, it would take you about 2 weeks, giving enough rest time, because you don't want to have them in hypnosis all the time. So it would take you about 2 weeks, and you could wipe someone permanently.
Unbeknownst to them in the process, like if they kept showing up for 4 hours, went back home 4 hours, like could you do this in a way that by the time they're at their last session, they have no idea that what you've been doing?
Sure. And in fact, it's probable that that will happen as a byproduct of wiping them, because obviously you're not going to remember that. One of the phenomena that is almost evidence in hypnosis, a lot of the times, if you're doing overt hypnosis, so if you know I'm hypnotizing you and you're okay with that, I want to give you phenomena that proves that hypnosis is real to you. That way you get more trapped in this loop. There's a very common phrase in hypnosis, which is anything that assumes trance causes trance, which basically means if you get some hypnotic phenomena, so say your hands raising in the air and you feel that happening, you're going to go even further in trance. So I want to cause things to make you believe that hypnosis is real, because that furthers the depth of trance or the effectiveness of trance later on. So one of the very common things that hypnotherapists use is something called time dilation or amnesia. So at the end of a therapy session, you'll wake up and you're like, that was 2 minutes long. What happened? Like it feels like it's 2 minutes, and it was a 2-hour session. And this is a very common hypnotic phenomenon that happens all the time, even in our day-to-day life. And the reason that that's so powerful is because when you wake up, you're like, that was 2 minutes and it was 2 hours. All of a sudden, your brain believes in hypnosis even more. That being said, you can totally just cause amnesia for the whole session. You can make them believe it was just like a life coaching session. You did some relaxation technique and have amnesia if they're receptive. I would never do this on someone who's doesn't have a base level of high suggestibility. Suggestibility is fluid. You can cause someone's suggestibility to go higher by certain techniques and things that you do.
Is there something from like if you're just observing a crowd from a distance, can you pinpoint who might be more suggestible just based on like simple body language?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm at liberty to share one of the ways, but generally speaking, there are physical tells that are 100% accurate on suggestibility, 100% accurate. So without giving, because if you're interested in this, you can delve. You can look up how facial expressions get etched onto the face. So if someone is happy their whole life, they've been smiling, they'll get crow's feet. All emotions, all feelings, all facial expressions do this. There is a way to tell if someone's been skeptical their whole life. And if they've not been skeptical their whole life, they'll have a smooth part of their face that tells you they're suggestible, and it's 100% accurate. Other than that, general openness, extroversion. If you are, say, you're starting a cult, the first place you're going to want to go to is a college campus. College campus students are much more likely to be suggestible. People on SSRIs, antidepressant medication, are much more likely to be suggestible, not because of the medication, but because of the fact that they have recognized that there's something reportedly wrong with them, and they are looking for fixes. People who were extremely religious and are now not extremely religious, so they've had a change, or vice versa. They grew up not religious and now they're extremely religious. People with dissociation, people along, generally speaking, the younger the better, are more suggestible. Once you hit the age of like 60, 65, or even 50, a lot of your life beliefs are kind of poured into you, so you're not going to be as suggestible to beliefs. There are lots of things, but if you've hypnotized even 100 people in your life, you get pretty good pretty quickly. You can kind of just spot, that's my guy right there. You can see it in their eyes. It's just something that you know that like that's going to be my guy.
Is there any, and I'm going to assume the answer is no. So let's get past the no part and then get into whatever the closest is that's not no. Like, is there any surefire or at least like basic building blocks of like a hypnosis self-defense that, let's say that you just realize you're incredibly susceptible to hypnosis or suggestion, and aside from figuring out and fixing that aspect, how can you know, if you were to come up and try and hypnotize me, like what are certain things that I could do if I'm like, wait, if this guy's trying to hypnotize me, like, do I say something? Do I like not make eye contact? Do I close myself? Like, what do I do exactly?
Yeah, there actually is a way. The issue arises in hypnosis itself. One of the most common questions you'll be asked as a hypnotist is, can you be hypnotized against your will? And this is a flawed question by nature, because will implies you know about it. So if I have a syringe full of medicine, the truth serum, and I'm coming at you and you see me coming at you with this vial, you can fight me off, you can run away, you can do all kinds of things. If I sneak up behind you without you knowing, trick you in the neck, put it in without you even seeing me there, that's not against your will. That's against your consent. That's against your knowledge or your awareness. You cannot be hypnotized in general at all against your will. If you know someone's trying to hypnotize you, you don't want to be hypnotized. It's not going to happen at all. If some
even if phenobarbital is involved?
That's a great question. And we'll get to that. That. That's a great question.
Keep going.
There's actually a better medication for inducing hypnotic trances, but it is a barbiturate. But if someone is hypnotizing you without your knowledge through covert hypnosis, linguistic entrainment, behavioral entrainment, very little you can do about that. There are two things, if you ever get the feeling that you maybe are in a situation that you need to be careful about that. You can either clasp your hands together very tightly. Milton Erickson, who is known to be the greatest hypnotist ever to live, said clasping your hands keeps you in the present. Hypnosis is about dissociation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just you can do it any way you want. It doesn't matter. Just hold your hands tightly together. Or your belly, and the skin on your belly, you just grab. You just grab that.
Like pinch it or like rub it or what?
You just grab a handful of it. It doesn't have to hurt. You just grab it so you can feel it. Both of these just keep you in the present. That's all it does. It prevents dissociation from happening. If you're someone who's prone to dissociation, assuming it's not severe, you can try this and you'll feel immediate effects. It roots you back to the present moment.
Could you, I'm spitballing here. Could you like bite the end of your tongue or do something a little bit less visual? So that like if someone were paying attention to you, they might not realize that you're, doing the equivalent of staying in the present by clasping your hand or rubbing your belly.
Sure. You could. Absolutely. The issue still arises is if it's a good hypnotist, if it's someone who has the ability to secretly hypnotize you, the chances that you're going to know it's happening are very low. You can bite your tongue because that causes pain, which pulls you out of anything like that.
Is there a default behavior you can adopt in general so that you're not looking for like, oh, now start being in the present? Is there like a constant mantra? Like I'll give an example maybe, but like in lucid dreaming, one of the techniques is you do constant reality checks where you're constantly trying to like put your hand through a glass, or you're like looking at text twice to see if it changes. And at a certain point, you just train your natural behavior to identify something out of the norm. Is there any equivalent to that for like anti-hypnosis?
There really is not. It's because suggestibility.
If you're being targeted, you're kind of screwed if you've got like the dream team after you.
If it's someone who's good, and there's most of them are not good. I promise you, they talk weird. It sounds like they're trying to hypnotize you. Like they start going in a deeper voice, and as you notice your reality, and it's goofy. And it's goofy and it's silly. And I guess if you wanted to become more aware of it, you can study on hypnotic language. So that actually is not something that's bad to look into NLP for. Is just study some hypnotic language. You'll start picking up those patterns really, really quickly, even on people that aren't like trying to hypnotize you. A lot of salespeople.
Can you give a practical example of that, of hypnotic language?
Sure. So one of the language patterns in hypnosis is called pacing and leading. It's one of the most common ones, and it's extremely effective. So if I'm trying to hypnotize you, I'm going to say, and paranoid, you're sitting in that chair and you're listening to me talk, and you're going into a trance. So I said three things there. Yeah. I said three things there. I said, you're sitting in that chair, which is true. You're listening to me talk, which is true. And you're going into a trance. Well, that may or may not be true. But I said one thing that was true, two things that was true. That third thing must be true. So if you imagine the brain as a giant firewall trying to keep things out, if it's bringing people in like a bouncer and it's like, you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good, there might be someone with a fake ID, but after 6 real IDs, it's just like, yeah, go ahead and come through. And so salesmen use this all the time where it says, this is going to be the thing on your house. Like if I'm selling solar, these are the panels on your house. This is one of the greatest panels in the world. You've seen that through here in the reviews. you've seen this is the total price, and we're the most reputable company on the planet. So these are the panels, which is true. This is the price, which is true. We're the most reputable company on the planet. Well, that may or may not be true, but after two true statements, it sounds real. And so double binds is something they use where they say, do you want to sign up today or tomorrow? Do you want to sign up before or after lunch? And so it gives you two options. You really can't break that. If you say yes to either one of those, you've agreed to sign up with them. So just by studying a lot of these language patterns, your ear will become accustomed to it, and you'll hear a lot of these things coming out. But I all the time get people asking that question of like, hey, how do you make yourself manipulation proof? How do you make yourself invulnerable to persuasion and influence? And the reality is you can't stop someone from making you feel really good. If someone who's really good at persuasion is going to make you feel like you're the best person in the world, and you really can't stop that, nor would you want to.
So if someone's being nice to you, then they're probably trying to brainwash you, and you should immediately attack back, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a miserable way to live, but sure, if you want to. Yeah, absolutely.
How much of, because I'm going back to what you said, when you think Darren Brown's doing a magic trick, he's doing hypnosis and vice versa. One of the things that he seems to really promote as being like the clincher to get people into these trances is that like he'll go and reach for like their hand, and then he'll subvert that by grabbing their elbow or like grabbing, like tapping on the head, kind of like the snake healers or the televangelists do, where like, oh, come, and then bam, and then they fall back. It's kind of, is that, I assume that's a real thing because it seems so universally adopted by people. When Darren Brown's doing it, is that part of the thing, or is that show?
Yeah, that was the first induction I ever learned, was the handshake induction.
What are the exact steps of that? Like, I get the vague premise, but like, if you were to instruct somebody, like, go and do this on your friends or your family today, what are the steps?
Sure. So now there's a lot of pre-step or pre-show that goes into those kind of things. Darren Brown can get away with doing it seemingly to anyone because he's in the UK and he's a rock star over there. Everyone knows Darren Brown. If it is much more difficult, there are ways to do what's called cold approaches or cold inductions, where you do the full, pardon me, I'm getting ahead of myself. So conversational hypnosis or covert hypnosis is not flashy. It's just, I'm speaking to you and I'm hypnotizing you through my words, and you might start fluttering off, your eyes might start getting glossy, and it's nothing overt. The flashy ones that you see where it's like hand on the face down like that, these are formal show inductions. You can do those without people telling you, without you saying that you're a hypnotist, without giving them warning. It's pretty difficult. And there's some other steps, usually using like essential oils to confuse and overload their senses. But if someone knows you're a hypnotist, they know that you are about to hypnotize them, you can reach out for their hand. And so you shake their hand, and at the last moment, you do what's called a pattern interrupt. So pattern interrupts do two things. One, they create a tremendous amount of focus, This kind of gets into the evolutionary biology thing that we talked about, where if you had an ancestor 6,000 years ago or even further, and they heard a stick break in the woods, all of their attention is over there, every bit of it, because that's one of two things. Either that's a meal for dinner, which is awesome, or that's a predator, a saber-toothed tiger that's about to rip their gills off. So all of their focus has been dictated over there. And this has been passed down to us through generations. So anytime you break a pattern, you create focus, and a lot of it. So when they reach out to your hand, you grab it and you do something. Generally, you hold it up into their face. The second thing this does is it makes them more suggestible, because they have what's like the deer in the headlights, where they were like, whoa, I don't know what just happened here. Their suggestibility rumps through the roof. It's neurologically, it's what's called a PGO spike. And it just is, the chemicals in their brain are searching. If you imagine there's a little guy in your head trying to make sense of the world, all of a sudden that guy's like, whoa, what happened? Whoa, what's going on? And so the first thing that you say to him will be taken as a command. And so you can say, sleep. You can say, look at your hand, listen to me. And they will take that on as a suggestion, even though they're not in hypnosis. So you reach out for your hand. As soon as they like make contact, so if this is my hand, I'm going to pull this hand up to their face. I'm going to say, look at your hand, look at the lines on your hand, look at one spot. As your hand moves towards your face, and I know it's going to move towards their face because I'm going to push it. I'm going to push their hand towards their face. Look at the lines on your hand, look at one point, look at one spot. As your hand moves towards your face, your eyes will begin to change focus, because from here to here, of course, your eyes are going to change focus. And this is the pacing and leading that we talked about. As your hand moves towards your face, your eyes will begin to change focus. As you become aware of your eyes, sleep. And so you go, look at your hand, look at the lines on your hand, look at one spot. As your hand moves towards your face, your eyes will begin to change focus. As you become aware of your eyes, sleep. And then as soon as you have them close their eyes and tilt their head forward, you have to deepen it. So you just say deeper and deeper. That's right. Deeper and deeper. If you've done some pre-show, they believe that you're a hypnotist. They believe that you can hypnotize someone. You can do it just step by step like that, and you will hypnotize people.
When you said you went to a school because you watched a DVD set and it worked on your first time, what did you do on that first time that worked, and who did you do it to?
So I did it to a guy named Josh Gaddy, who is a classmate of mine. And I had just tried everything I saw on the DVD, because at that DVD, there was like 10 things that were done in that, like just different routines and tricks that you can do using hypnosis. So I had made him forget his name, made him forget numbers and letters. I made him believe I was the genie from Aladdin, which is a very standard, stereotypical hypnosis stunt. One of the most interesting.
Is this late 90s? Like Disney Aladdin had just come out, or
yeah,
what?
Yeah. Robin
Okay.
Williams. Yeah, big green. Big blue genie. And there was one thing that I tried on Josh, where I used to carry a combination lock on my keychain for this specific trick, because I saw it in there and I was like, I'm going to try that. And basically, when they're in hypnosis, you tell them, hey, you're going to think of this 3-digit letter or number. This is the combination to my lock. And when I tell you to try to guess it, that's going to be the number you guess. You're going to open it. You're not going to know how you knew the number. You're not going to realize I told you the number. You're going to forget all of that. You're just going to believe that you opened it up just off of pure intuition. And so that's kind of another common thing. But what was amazing was I would guess I was in my freshman year. My junior year, so 2 years later, I forgot that I had never done that to him. I'd never actually done that trick. I had hypnotized him 2 years ago, and I was just like, let me try this out. Let me just see if this works. So I handed him the combination lock 2 years later, and I said, just try to guess what number that would be. And the first time he tried something, he guessed that exact number. Not guessed, he knew it somewhere deep inside of his brain. But it was one of the things that kind of broke my reality a little bit, because I had almost forgotten about that completely. And he did too, obviously. But somewhere deep in there, he remembered for 2 years this 3-letter combination code that I gave him when we were 14 years old. So I don't, that kind of gets into another topic of this idea of, do suggestions wear off? Depends. Some people it might, but not for everyone.
That example of the combination lock is a good one, because it has a very specific finite answer, and if you just know the 3 numbers, then you get the answer. What about something like high performing athletes that put themselves in the zone of like visualizing the basket going in, or some other like skill based technical feat that they have to go through? Could you like technically hypnotize someone to always hit a home run, or always get the basket in, or always do something that requires more than just memorizing 3 numbers?
So you can't make them always do it. if you could, there'd be someone who has done it. There'd be someone who's out there. This is what's called generative change. So generative change is like progressive things that add on to something they're already good at. But it happens all the time. You can definitely do it. Mike Tyson is probably the most popular one. He was hypnotized hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, to become better at boxing. Many boxers are hypnotized constantly to be better, to give them alter egos. Deontay Wilder was a big example
Wittingly
of that.
Like they knowingly get hypnotized? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you probably will find that in every single sport. I know people in the NFL who've been hypnotized or reportedly been hypnotized. NBA. Sports is very, very common for hypnosis because one, it's relaxing. You're so stressed and tense all the time, but also it does have generative change. It does. I'm not saying that it will take me and turn me into Michael Jordan, but it is incremental improvements, better than nothing for sure.
Is what would be something that like a normie, like a non-high performing anything, just like a normal person that's got a 9 to 5, what kind of benefit could they have by getting, hypnotized? Let's say they're not trying to stop smoking, or they're not trying to, like do some like corrective action, like just a general, let's go throw money to a hypnotist and see how much better my life gets.
Sure. Let me just first off say I'm very pro nicotine. So I am very pro nicotine.
Yeah, I'm not anti-nicotine either, man. I mean, the Native Americans were onto something. I think
I'm telling you.
I'm anti the corporatization of
That's
nicotine,
true.
But yeah.
That's well, yeah. The cigarette companies, they've been doing some evil stuff. I'm with you on that. No. If you want to like stop smoking or anything, sure, absolutely. But if you don't have anything big, I would say it's probably not worth it because they tend to be pretty expensive, and insurance doesn't cover them.
What are we talking expensive? Like $500 an hour or what?
Yeah, for a good hypnotist, you're looking at $400 to $600 an hour. Now, the good thing about hypnotherapy is it doesn't last forever. At most, you're going to usually have 4 sessions at most. Generally speaking, if you're with a good hypnotist, he probably will only take 2, depending on the level of your issue. So if you have like a very deep-rooted phobia, sometimes those are the easiest to get rid of because you just need to face what is actually bothering you, and then you're over it. Some people, it's a lot more minor, and there's a lot of weird whack-a-mole things you have to do with hypnotherapy. Pardon me. There's a lot of weird whack-a-mole things you have to do, so it can take longer. It is very effective for things like anxiety, phobias, limiting beliefs. If you're trying to become more successful, go see a hypnotist that is also a life coach. I wouldn't go see a hypnotherapist. Usually they're not too savvy on the business side of things, but go see a hypnotherapist that's also like a life coach or a business coach. And there's several of them out there. But if you just you're happy with your life, there's nothing else bothering you, I wouldn't say there's really much of a reason to go and actively seek out a hypnotherapist.
Okay. I was just thinking like you can't just go and drop 10 grand once in a while to gain like a new superpower.
No, it unfortunately doesn't work that way. If hypnosis was as powerful as like the movies want to make it, every politician would be using hypnosis all the time, but they don't. They don't use it.
You had an example, like let's say you wanted to get over a phobia. So like a practical example, let's say someone is terrified of heights and they want to get over being terrified of heights. Aside from the practical way that you would approach it and like whatever the outcome would be, is that a real phobia, or is that just tapping into like life preservation? And if you were to get someone, over that phobia, like isn't that like a disservice to human evolution that like now you're not afraid that you might die when in fact you might die?
Sure. Well, that leads to the idea that dying is inherently bad. And so if it is for you, if you're like, that's something I want to keep on, absolutely, sure. It depends on how bad. Like, are you afraid of heights on 2 steps of a ladder? Are you afraid of heights on an airplane where it's extremely safe? Or are you...
Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Or are you afraid of heights on this awfully built state fair roller coaster, which you'd be crazy not to be afraid of. There's different levels to it. Self-preservation is the highest boundary that humans have. We are more willing to kill someone else than for us to die, generally speaking. And so that is the hardest thing to overcome. But generally speaking, if it's something that's irrational, so a phobia is an irrational fear, you can get rid of it pretty easily. If it's a rational fear, if it's something that your body is like, hey, we need to stay safe, hypnosis is much less effective for things that are totally rational things to be afraid of.
Okay, and I'm actually glad that you finished that with like the roller coaster example, because that's kind of what I had in mind, that roller coasters are only fun because your body is telling you like you're about to die.
You're gonna die.
Yeah, and if you took that part out, then are you just like stone faced, riding roller coasters, and you just don't care about them anymore?
No. You're still getting the adrenaline. You're still getting it. Just your perception around it has changed. So, like anxiety and excitement are physiologically the same. It is the same experience to be excited versus anxious. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure increases, your muscles tighten up, your shoulders probably rise up towards your ears a little bit. The lower muscles under your eyes tense up. Lots of weird things happen. But it's just the perception of whether this is good or bad that changes it from excitement to anxiety. So if you can change that perception, you're good. It's I'm excited. I'm not anxious.
How would you do that? Like if you were to hypnotize someone to say the next time you're going to get anxious, turn that into excitement.
You would just anchor it. And so you would have them relive exciting moments, things that they are actually excited about. They have pleasant, excitatory memories about. And then you would just anchor that feeling over and over and over again. So you can feel your heart rate increasing, and this is good. So instead of having a panic attack because your heart rate is increasing, this is something that's good. It means you're having fun. And so you just reframe it because they're highly suggestible in hypnosis. You just take the physical symptoms that they normally were scared about and you frame them as good. You do have to be careful. I would always be skeptical if you're doing something like this and the hypnotherapist doesn't ask you to get a waiver of health from a medical doctor first. I've heard stories, very unfortunately, of people who have like migraines really bad. And there are ways of eliminating pain permanently through hypnosis, and not even through hypnosis, just through verbal suggestibility. I remember my girlfriend got really freaked out when we first started dating because she was like, I always get this really bad TMJ. And I just did some linguistic techniques, made her hand go numb. And then I moved the numbness to her jaw and I said, it's going to stay there forever. She hasn't had jaw pain since. It's gone completely. There are ways of removing pain. You've got to know the person's bill of health first, because I've heard horror stories of people having migraines come in. Migraines are gone. They don't have any more headaches. They don't have any pain in their head at all. And then 6 months later, they die of a brain tumor that was undiagnosed. So
it's like the pain was a good thing.
Yeah. So you do have to be careful with it. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And so you do need to know what you're doing. Otherwise, it could be very, very bad.
When you said that you just have someone relive positive experiences and anchor that, are you anchoring it to something, a kinetic touch, a smell, a sound, all of the above? Is there something outside of the 5 basic senses that you can anchor things to?
If you want them to be excited on will, you can. That's what you would do. If you're like, I want you to get excited whenever you want, sure. If you're like with an athlete, for example, and you're like, I want you to get really pumped up, I'd anchor it to maybe they touch their ring finger and thumb together. That's a very common one that I use. For something like anxiety, you would anchor it to the symptoms, the feeling of excited to the symptoms.
Let's say like stage fright, right? Like you have to go and perform in front of 10,000 people. You got to go and give a big monologue for an hour and there's no one's there to help you. Like, how would you train yourself or someone else to get excited about that versus anxious?
Sure. There's actually a better way for stage fright. But like for that, like I would just be like, whenever I would just give the suggestion in hypnosis, whenever you feel your heart rate increasing, whenever you feel your body tensing up, you're going to know that this is because you're excited. There's no such thing as anxiety, only excitement. So you would just suggest it. You would just, all you would do is just suggest it. That being said, if you have confidence issues or composure issues in front of large crowds, and obviously we know public speaking is a bigger fear than the idea of death for people. There are two interventions, and I will preface this because no one ever takes my advice on it. This is the biggest game changer you can do for yourself. I'm all for hating pharmaceutical companies. I'm with you on that. Trust me on this, and you want to try this if you have confidence or composure issues. Talk to a doctor and get prescribed, not forever, get prescribed 2 medications, metoprolol and methocarbamol. You're going to take a 50 milligram dose of metoprolol and a 500 milligram dose of methocarbamol. Metoprolol is a very, very, very safe beta blocker. So all it does is it slows down the heart. It slows down the heart. Your blood pressure is going to go down a little bit. Your heart's not going to be beating hard. So if you have racing heart and you all tight and you kind of feel hot and sweaty when you're going on stage or when you're introducing, talking to women, whatever you want to do, this will cut that down by a lot, by probably 80%, if you feel it at all. Methocarbamol is a muscle relaxer. So it just relaxes your muscles. Also very, very, very safe. The reason I say these 2 drugs instead of like Xanax or a barbiturate, Valium, something like that, is because these are not psychoactive and they're not addictive. So they're not psychoactive. If you take Xanax, if you take Valium, you get flooded with GABA. You feel very, very good. You feel no anxiety. But the moment those chemicals leave your system, you feel probably even worse than before you took it. So that's not a good long-term strategy. That doesn't change anything. If you take metoprolol and methocarbamol, again, talk to a doctor. I am not a medical professional. Talk to a doctor.
In your advice, how would, because in my experience, if you go into the doctor and you're like, here's the drugs I want, it's usually a fast pass to not get those. They'll be like, here's your ibuprofen, sir. Like, we'll see you out now. Like, how would you actually get these exact things? Because I assume I know methocarbamol is prescription because I have to take that for like back issues sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, both of them are prescription drugs. You will not have an issue as long as you're not sketchy about it. You're not going to have an issue getting them because 1, they're not addictive. 2, they're not dangerous. And 3, they're not psychoactive. So no drug addict is like, give me metoprolol so my heart.
Not a lot of pill mills for methocarbamol.
Yeah. And so what you can say, the exact line I used was, hey, I have a life coach that's trying to get me over anxiety. He said, talk to a doctor about methocarbamol and metoprolol and take that just while you are doing your public speaking, and it's going to help calm you down. And the doctor was like, yeah, absolutely. Here's a 2-month script for it. You're good to go. And I think I was in that doctor's office. Like I was talking to the doctor for like 3 minutes. It was like, he didn't even bother about it. So I don't think that this is something that you're going to have trouble prescribing. Again, very, very safe, not psychoactive. You only have to take it for 2 months if you're doing exposure therapy. So if you are actively going out and doing things that are making you uncomfortable, what your brain is going to say is, oh, my heart's not beating fast. Oh, my shoulders aren't at my ears. I'm not all tensed up. I actually feel pretty comfortable. And if you do this over and over and over, about 60 days, you don't have to do it every single day, go talk to a different girl every day. But if you are doing these things repetitively throughout the 2 months, what you're going to find is you can come off of those medications forever. And you've built new neural pathways where it says, I can go do this behavior and I'm not anxious and scared and afraid of dying. And it is brilliant. I did it myself, and it was a game changer on my confidence level. I can now go out and talk to anyone I want, start conversations with strangers, hypnotize random people, do stage shows, public speaking. And there still is a little bit of adrenaline, which is a natural thing. But it's not like my brain is saying, oh, my God, we're going to die. I need to get out of here right now. It is a much more subtle, calm way. So if you're not, talk to a medical doctor. But no one takes my advice on that because they hate medicine so much, which I understand why. There is an epidemic.
I don't hate medicine. I'm actually an outlier, even within my own community here. But like I have a prescription to Xanax, and it's definitely, I take it like 4 times a year, and it's usually if I have to go to like an airport or like a crazy convention or something, which is I guess known as like an acute sort of anxiety, where it's like I can take this thing and it solves it for this 4 to 6 hours, and I don't care about the repercussions because it's over by then. And it is a freaking game changer. And a lot of people say that I'm like, I just am being controlled by the Rockefeller medical system because of that. But I mean, I see like very tangible benefits within like 20 minutes, like no doubt. Like I will be thinking to myself, normally I'd be kind of freaking out right now, but I'm not. And I'm very aware of like the difference of behavior there.
Yeah. Well, and if you're ever taking a high dose of psychedelics, Xanax, and you're having a bad trip, Xanax will knock you out of it. Xanax will save your ass. Oh man, if you're taking like a big dose of psilocybin or LSD, if you're going to take psychedelics, I would do mushrooms. There's a lot more really, really strong evidence for some super cool stuff neurologically with psilocybin.
I'm trying to think of the actual name for this compound. It was called MER15 during MK Ultra. That was like its classified name. But it was basically proposed as this magic antidote for LSD, magic mushrooms, like any of the psychedelics that they were aware of at the time. It was MER15, I believe. You ever heard of this before?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll continue talking. I want to see if I can remember exactly what the real name of it was after it became declassified, because I've never heard of it outside of the context of it being revealed originally.
Mm-hmm. I probably have some, and this is definitely my own bias for sure. I have some distrust of LSD just because of what the CIA did. Because they self-reported. It's not a conspiracy to say they admitted themselves that 70 to 90% of the LSD in supply, in circulation, from 1960 to 1975 was put there by the CIA. They were the ones who put it into the community. Because
I'm preaching to the choir at this point, my friend. Yeah. And I mean, you could extend the exact same thing to magic mushrooms, Salvia divinorum, even mescaline was essentially like it was like the dirty thing for the Native Americans, and we don't do that as nice Puritans or Pilgrims or whatever until they isolated it and they compared it to adrenaline, which I think was isolated in like 1901 by some Japanese dude, and then from there it was just like everyone's on drugs, like literally everyone. Kids, old people, housewives, everybody.
Yep. Well, psilocybin it's so cool, the research coming out about it. Very limited research, but there's some thought that it might even promote neurogenesis, the growth of neurons, which is, if that is true, and I'm not saying it is, but if that is true, huge.
Well, isn't that attributed to nearly all psychedelics? The neuroplasticity, meaning like the ability for you to start generating new neural pathways just because of the supersaturation of all the neurotransmitters that are like causing connections just because they're trying to latch on to anything they can.
Yes. So I apologize. Neuroplasticity, yes, absolutely. Psilocybin, again, very limited. I don't want to say that this is guaranteed what happens.
I guarantee it. Paranoid American guarantees it.
There is evidence that it causes neurogenesis. So the creation, not of neural pathways, of neurons. We used to believe you cannot grow new neurons at all, guaranteed, which is still the scientific consensus, to be fair. But there is limited evidence that psilocybin actually has the potential to create new neurons, which is incredible. It's quite possibly one of the biggest brain discoveries that we've had in the last 100 years. It is huge.
We're going to get into mind control in a second here. On a slight tangent, I have to ask, are you familiar at all with Salvia divinorum and how that affects the brain at all? What are your thoughts as you're nodding yes?
I would never, ever take it.
Like, have you, and you've heard about it, and you've decided not to based on what you've heard, or have you a personal experience?
I've never taken it. No.
Okay.
I
Well, look under your chair, Mason. No. Well, the reason it's so fascinating to me, I am biased because it's been decades, but I have taken it and I loved it because of how much other people hated it. Like, it was just terrifying to them. And I found that so novel and interesting and introspective. But the thing that fascinates me the most is that it's not serotonergic, right? It operates off of beta or kappa opioid receptors, which makes it incredibly unique. Or I guess, let me ask you, does that make it unique? Are there other kappa opioid receptor based psychedelics in the same category as Salvia?
I'm not familiar. Almost every single one of them that I know is serotonin based. I don't know any of them that operate off of opioid receptors in general.
Can you hypnotize yourself out of being fearful of Salvia?
I'm sure I could. I don't know that I want to. I feel like that's kind of getting into what we were talking about earlier. It's like, that's a rational thing to be afraid of. And I will say it is my own bias. I haven't looked much into Salvia divinorum at all. So I really don't, I can't speak on like any of the scientific literature on it. That being said, it is like the stories that I've heard that are like, whoa. And I'm, even if it came out and it's like, oh, Salvia does this for you, I don't know that the risk of a traumatic event is worth that. I just don't know. For me personally,
what are the traumatic events that you have in mind? Because to preface that, I believe that it was made illegal because there was a kid in like upstate New York that was incredibly depressed, and he basically fixated himself in a tent in like the garage. And then there's been lots of if you go on YouTube, you can find all the ones from early 2000 or people like jumping out of windows or falling and hurting themselves and stuff. Outside of those, though, what's the traumatic experience that would make it a no-go?
Well, for me personally, it kind of comes from my own experience. When I was 18 years old, I developed panic attack disorder from marijuana, from weed.
What was that?
I developed panic attack disorder.
Oh, panic attack disorder.
From weed. So I had one panic attack on weed. I'd never really had anxiety in general before that. I had one panic attack on weed, thought I was dying of a heart attack. And all of a sudden, I'm having 2 to 3 panic attacks a day for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the marijuana guys hate me for that. They're like, oh, it's not, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not even saying it should be illegal. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, in my experience, it kind of caused a little minor psychotic break in me, because I had panic attacks for 2 years because of it. And my anxiety is still not, I've gotten way better at controlling it, because once you have anxiety, it doesn't really go away. You just get better at dealing with it and coping with it. Well,
because you're unintentionally anchoring it, because you feel it and you're like, oh, this is anxiety. And now It's like you keep getting deeper and deeper, right?
Yeah. Well, and so, but even that, so like I will get the physical symptoms of anxiety, and rather than it being anxious, it's more irritating. It's like, oh, heart palpitation. Oh, I'm getting, what is this? Like ant bites, itchy, like, ew. And so it's more irritating than anxiety inducing. But that was something that I had for 2 years. It's like these full-fledged panic attacks, which was another reason that I got into neurology, seeing if there was ways to fix it. And there are. It's very individualized. So what works for one person won't work for everyone. But after a lot of experimentation, I found that really more than anything, exposure therapy for me was the best. And so I was getting like nearly agoraphobic. I wouldn't leave my house. And so exposure therapy helped probably more than anything else. Social anxiety, my king, was that methylcarbamol and metoprolol mix. That cured any social anxiety I had. But as far as like the actual panic attacks, it was just me getting out into the world, getting over it. If I had a panic attack, I just stay calm, sit down, let it pass. And those are nightmares. I don't wish panic attacks on my worst enemy. They're really, really bad. But
yeah, it's a fair justification for for staying in your lane. There's I'm
Sure.
not gonna push that on anybody, just because I know it is a rarity that someone would even come out on the other end and be like, "Oh, thank you so much for recommending that." You know what I mean? That's
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
not what happens. Usually, like it's anger, and it's like, "Why would you do that to me?" So,
Yep. Yeah.
all right, I want to start getting into mind control type stuff, and I almost want to just skip over the MK Ultra. If anyone wants to know about MK Ultra, I've got this MK Ultra pamphlet that's been out for years now. I want to know how much credit you give some of the ancillary, less documented, more rumored type things. I'll start with the more outlandish. It's hard to tell which one's the most, but let's start with like Project Montauk, Camp Hero, Stranger Things, right? This was the idea that they had, getting into some of the weeds, but there was like a Delta T antenna that could open up like rifts in time space, and that they were finding these indigo children that could astral project perfectly. And you've seen Stranger Things, I assume. And
Actually not.
Okay, or
No,
are you
I
familiar
haven't.
with Preston Nichols' work and the Montauk Project and all that?
Yeah. Well, and so I don't want to make direct claims on saying yes, this stuff is real. However, because part of it is, what is the CIA admitting to, kind of knowing, because we know that like nearly 70,000 documents from the MK Ultra days were destroyed in the 70s, 1973, 1975. And so we know that they burned a lot of documents. We don't have everything. And so is the stuff that we have things that they wanted out there? Like so that you get into some kind of gray territory with that stuff. But you do have projects like, and once you get into like the more metaphysical stuff, that's kind of out of my lane. I will admit. So when you get
time
into like
space continuum riffs, or maybe outside of that realm.
Yeah, some of like what was it? Project Stargate, I think, is what the CIA did, where they said they broke through the firmament of the world. Like
The Men Who Stare at Goats by Ron Johnson, I believe.
Yeah, like we were astral projecting, talking to aliens, and I don't know about that. But again, that is not my specialty or my wheelhouse. I would be skeptical that they did. Now, I'm a devoted Catholic, so I think that there is a spiritual realm, but I like to separate it pretty heavily from anything of scientific basis. I don't know that a lot of that stuff is true, or I'm sure they had those projects. I don't know that they actually had the foundings that were reported. But again, not my wheelhouse, not my expertise.
When you say, let me just press on you just a little bit. I promise we won't derail. But when you say devout Catholic, how devout in that, like during transubstantiation and you hear the little bell jingle and the father's holding up the Eucharist, is that turning into the body of Christ at that moment? Is the wine turning into blood? Is transubstantiation real in that metaphysical sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so your mind could be open to the Project Montauk and like the creatures from inner dimensions being real, but not willing to take the stance on that outside of open to it. Do I have that right?
It's I need to do more research on it. That's what it is. Okay. I'm not my wheelhouse there. Yeah.
Okay, let me walk backwards away from the metaphysical one a little bit. And are you familiar at all with the work of Fritz Springmeier and his book, which is like how to create a completely undetectable mind control Illuminati slave? I butchered the title of that a little bit. It came out, I think, in 96, 97. And he claimed that there was Project Monarch. And I if you haven't heard of Monarch, this was basically them like kidnapping kids, and it was an extension of some of the German research that we imported over after World War II in paperclip, but that it was specifically trauma-based programming, and the steps, the gloss over, the claims that Fritz Springmeier makes in this book that he was like privy to all this like, top secret information, was that they would begin with an amniocentesis needle when like a baby is still forming and it's in the womb, and they would use that to puncture it and just like prod it as like the first controlled trauma, so that they got a head start on it being born as being that first trauma. So they start this concept of like artificially having control over trauma. Then there's the birth, and then he describes this concept of putting the kids in what they call woodpecker cages. Some of this might sound outlandish. I'm just repeating in case you're not familiar with the specific claims. They would put kids up to 3 years old, I think, in these woodpecker grid cages that would just be randomly electrocuted at intervals. And it was an unpredictable interval, so your mind could never latch onto a pattern and get ready for it. It would just come whenever it came. Essentially, the concept of like breaking down the psyche, that once you can convince somebody that they can't see it coming and that it's always going to be coming and there's nothing to prepare yourself for, they kind of break down. And at that moment, the handler would come in and love bomb them. They would save them from this, perceived hell, love bomb them, and then at the peak of this love bombing would do some kind of unconscionable, horrible, horrific act that would be the exact inverse of this perceived, savior that saved them from this. And that kind of is the very beginning. And then after you do that, that's like how you prep the meal. Like it always goes through that process. And then at the tail end of it, it's like, okay, now these ones are going to be the beta sex kittens, and these ones are going to be the Sirhan style polka dot assassins and what have you. How much of that is legit?
Yeah, it's real. Unfortunately, yeah, it's that is all 100% accurate. And when I say accurate, I mean that's how it would work. If you really wanted to create like just total slaves, that's like mentally, that's how it would work. That really comes from kind of two things. One, before MK Ultra started, there was two projects that kind of pulled off of each other. So I won't go too deep into the MK Ultra route, but during the Korean War in the 1950s, we had U.S. soldiers coming over to America saying that they hated America, that they can't believe they even stood for this country. They hated everything about it. And this freaked out the U.S. government a lot because they thought there was some brainwashing formula that they didn't figure out that the communists have. And so what they decided to do was start a project called Project Bluebird, head by a man named Dr. George Escherbrooks, who was a professor at Colgate University. And he's one of the godfathers of hypnosis, known as the king of direct hypnosis. He very much was, you are getting tired, you are sleepy. There was no subtlety to him. He was very, you're listening to me, I'm putting you into hypnosis. And he created the basis of what is the Manchurian process. So creating a secret agent, a sleeper agent, originally what he was trying to do more than anything was create carriers. So basically to make someone interrogation proof, you split the personality. So you have the real John and then the secret John, whatever this part is. And after you've split them in hypnosis, you have this second personality fed all the secrets of the government that you need him to have. And then you make that inaccessible by the actual guy himself, by John. He can't retrieve that second personality. He can't talk to him. It's just hidden away in his brain, only brought out by a passcode. And the idea of this was so that he could go to some random country, get captured by their foreign nationals, and he was totally immune to all interrogation, because no matter what they would do to him, he wouldn't give up the information, because that was a secret. He didn't even know he knew that information. Dr. George Escherbrooks was famous for a lot of things. One, inducing a hypnotic polar bear in his imagination that would follow him around. He would show up in alleyways and scare Escherbrooks really, really badly. And it took him a while to figure out how to banish that. But one of the interesting...
He did that to himself on accident?
Yeah, he was just seeing if he could do it. And he had a hypnotically induced polar bear stuck in his imagination. Yeah. There was he experimented with some of the drugs, some of the truth serums that we have today. But mainly he was doing hypnosis work. And he did this process of splitting personalities on 12 different people, the first being an army officer that volunteered. He did it on secretaries. He did it on usually military officials, and created this whole thing. And in his book called Spiritualism, he wrote out a paragraph. And one of the lines in there was, I can hypnotize a man to commit treason against the United States in a single session. I think this was Escherbrooks gloating a little bit. I don't know that he was being 100% honest here, but I don't doubt the truthfulness of saying that you can hypnotize someone to commit treason. And
he could be defining a session as like 80 consecutive hours because he had that sort of authority within the military to like contain you. Right?
Yes, absolutely. But after Escherbrooks passed on, before he passed on, there was a document found tying correspondence from Dr. George Escherbrooks to Milton Erickson. And if you know about hypnosis, Milton Erickson's the biggest name. No one thought he had anything to do with MKUltra forever. And there was a single document of a letter from Milton Erickson to Dr. George Escherbrooks explaining how he would split personalities. So there was a lot more people in these programs, high-profile people, than we thought.
Where can that be found, that letter?
It is at Colgate. So Colgate University has thousands of correspondence, letters and things from Dr. George Escherbrooks. I think you can find it on their letter, but they'll also send some copies over to you if you'd like.
And they'll put your name on a list, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, you want what letter? The Escherbrooks and the Erickson? Okay, yeah, sure, guy.
Yeah, but I think they have over 70,000 documents from Escherbrooks. But so after Project Bluebird, it kind of transformed into Project Artichoke, which is like the sleeper agent thing, where they were like, okay, we need to actually create sleeper agents. We need to do the Sirhan things. Speaking of, I am absolutely convinced that Sirhan was hypnotized. He definitely 100% was a sleeper agent.
Do you think the anchor was the polka dot dress as well?
It could be, or that lady in general. It's kind of impossible to tell what the anchor was, especially just considering he just burst into the room. He was not even supposed to be there. He was supposed to leave. He was just like, he never drank alcohol. He had like several Tom Collins. And then he was like, I just need a cup of coffee to sober up. So he went back to the kitchen for the cup of coffee. He wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. All of a sudden, this woman with a polka dot dress pinches him on the arm or on the shoulder. She definitely had something to do with it, for sure. But every hypnotist I've ever talked to, all of the video essays, Sirhan is one of the most suggestible people in the world. There have been hypnotists go and interview him and talk to him, and they said using the most basic conversational techniques, you can put him in and out of trance like nothing. And so I am very convinced that Sirhan was hypnotized to kill Robert Kennedy. But bringing all of that back to Project Monarch, one of the things that Dr. George Escherbrooks found in the creation is something that aided tremendously in creating what's called dissociation, so separation from self, which is if you ever want to create a blank slate in humans, you really want to add a lot of dissociation. You can do this linguistically, right? You can talk to a person at the bar for 10 minutes, and you can watch them turn into a blank slate right in front of you, where you can tell them to do anything you want, and they will do it. Now, that's not going to last forever. You're not going to have a slave for the rest of your life over that. But you can do those things with linguistic dissociation. Constant trauma creates dissociation, and a lot of it. And this is why people who have had very traumatic events in their childhood will often dissociate. They'll often kind of just be out of their head, have a weird thing that either reality's not real or they're not real, or just some weird phenomena. And this is good. So hypnosis is by default a dissociative process. You don't have to hypnotize someone to create dissociation. And trauma is the most powerful creator of dissociation we know. So when you get into this constant traumatizing and heroic figure, which also comes from a term called fractionation. So if you're feeling really bad and then you're feeling great, and then you feel really bad and you feel great, whoever you feel great with, you create a enormous amount of attraction to, a absolute bonding. And so Project Monarch, again, I don't want to make any claims that this definitely happened without a doubt, but they would probably not know that this is exactly how you do it unless they did it. And so that is exactly if you wanted to create just someone who's a total slave. The injections, I think, go a little too far. I don't think you have to inject the embryo. But hey,
that's in my opinion, that's where it gets a little bit outlandish. But it's like, it's the premise is that they have full control. That even the first trauma that you've got is artificially induced by someone that can do it, versus like leaving up for chance.
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
Well, this is the micro, right? So now we're talking about like an individual person and training that person. If we walk that back into like the macro, a lot of in the conspiracy realm, right, which is a weird term, but there's a lot of insinuation that world events are essentially trauma-based programming at a massive scale. So I'll give an example of like, if you accept the premise that 9/11 was an inside job, orchestrated, planned, everything, that in addition to using it for political gain, that it was like a massive trauma-based milestone for everyone to latch onto, the same way that JFK assassination might have been like a national trauma-based thing. In that context, do you give any credit to these like world events being orchestrated for the explicit reason, among others, of like a mass trauma event to anchor people to?
Yeah. We saw it. So in 9/11, I'm a big fan of body language too. One of the things that we learned from 9/11 was how to spot grief from body language. And there's two ways. One, the head, and it's very hard to fake grief. It's very, very hard. But the head pushes up and it wrinkles. So the eyebrows kind of go up and in. And then underneath the chin, this little muscle is called the chin boss. That's its actual name.
The chin boss?
The chin boss, yeah. And it pushes in and it wrinkles right here. So kind of like that. And so, but without lip movement. It's very, very hard to fake these. But when 9/11 happened, researchers noticed that all of the citizens in New York, who are normally very prudish and bitchy and pushy and not super overtly nice to people on the street, all of them would look at each other and just go and use that grief muscle, just kind of, and that's how they would greet each other on the street for months. So we saw, and grief is a part of trauma. And so we saw an entire city traumatized from 9/11. I'm not making any claims that 9/11 was faked or not real or anything like that, but we saw the impact on a huge population. There's 8 million people in New York City, I think. 8 million people. And every one of them had this kind of trauma from this event. And so it is not a outlandish claim to say, with the popularization of the news, everything still being readily available, that this is a world scale trauma creation to make people dissociate so that they're more suggestible. I truly believe that social media is the most dangerous invention that humans have ever created. I think it trumps the nuclear bomb. I really, really believe that.
I mean, I would find it hard to disagree. They're on different scales and categories, but like, what's the most dangerous part of social media that makes you say that?
Repetition. The key to brainwashing, if I were to sum up brainwashing in one word, it would be repetition. And so if I control social media, I get to see what you see. I get to control what you see every single day, probably for hours a day. I can do anything I want with you. If I had 4 hours a day and I could control what you saw, Clockwork Orange style, you can't peel your eyes away from this phone, I could control a nation. And I'm not the smartest person on the planet. I'm not. These scientists that are designing this little app on your phone to be the most addictive thing possible, you are fighting against 1,000 scientists that purposely trying to get your attention. If they had bad intentions, they could just start showing you anything they want. If they wanted a race war to show out, they would show you only people from other races beating up the people from your race. If they wanted to create political division, they would only show you what the other side of the party is doing. They can do this, and in a way they do this. And so I'm not making a declarative statement that this is what's going on purpose right now, but dangerous is a potential. It's not something that's happened yet. It's a potential. A gun is dangerous because of its potential, not because of what it actually does. And so the potential of social media to be dangerous it's a devastating consequence if it were to be used badly. It could do all kinds of stuff, really, really, really bad stuff, because everyone's glued to their phone for at least 4 hours, if not more, a day. And if they're controlling what you see, that's bad news, because your brain's going to take that as fact. If you see it 1 million times in a week, you're going to believe it's true, and that's dangerous.
I have to assume out of blind optimism, so if I'm wrong, don't even correct me, but that if in some theoretical situation they decided to use social media for good, like could like, as powerful as you're describing it, could it just be used as positive reinforcement and actually tangibly improve like humanity across the board if it was just promoting like, you can do it, you can get over this, together we can make the world better, versus, here's a bunch of black people beating up a white guy, here's a bunch of white people beating up a black, vice versa? Like or does it only have a certain effectiveness because it's all virtual?
No, it would, if everything you saw on social media was positive, that would change the world completely. It would make everyone so much better, like infinitely better. We cannot even imagine how much better that would make the world. The issue is people don't watch that. The social media companies, at their core, they want to make money. They want to keep your attention. I don't think that they're inherently out to start some crazy stuff in the world. They really, more than anything, they just want your money.
Yeah, we didn't start the fire, right? It was always burning.
Yeah. Oh, Billy Joel's my favorite. But they want your attention, and the thing that keeps your attention is bad news. And so part of the responsibility lies on us. If we want the world to be good, we've got to start looking away. Like, we have to look away. We can't, it's, if we're feeding their algorithms saying, oh, these bad things get millions of views, and they continuously get millions of views, that's what it's going to feed us. It's never going to feed us some puppy being saved from a fire. It's going to always push, hey, here's some horrible thing that happened to this kid in New Hampshire. I live 1,000 miles away from New Hampshire. I don't know why I'm seeing this. This is a new experience for humans. We've never experienced this amount of connectivity in the world ever throughout all of human history. It's dangerous. It really is.
I got two other questions, and we'll start to wrap this up a little bit. I want to be mindful of your time, and I feel like we could go on for hours and hours. So we'll have to have a part 2 or a 3 on this. But okay, so I've got 2 in particular. Let me just state them out loud now so I don't forget later. Psychic Driving by Dr. Ewan Cameron, and then I want to talk to you about AI ramifications and psychology. But when you mentioned that repetition is probably like the most important key, like that is the thing, it makes me think about Dr. Ewan Cameron, aka Dr. White, if you're into the Fritz Springmeier Project Monarch vernacular, that he was technically Dr. White apparently, but that Ewan Cameron Psychic Driving was recording a phrase, either someone saying it or another voice saying it, and just playing it to you over and over and over. And like in the world of like computer science or like IT security, it almost feels like a brute force technique, like just nonstop. You're just hearing this thing over and over and over. There's really no subtlety about it. And in some cases where people were resistant to it or it was just too irritating, he would give them like an insulin-induced coma or an LSD-induced episode for like days, weeks, months. You know what I mean? How effective is that? Just like nobody can stop that from brainwashing them? Could you protect yourself from straight up psychic driving? Let's say take insulin-induced coma out of the running. I don't think you can like, mentally block yourself from that. But from like a psychic driving, can you bad analogy, but I'm just thinking of like Village of the Damned, where they all realize, oh, if I just think of a brick wall, these kids can't get into my head and make me do horrible things, right? Is there something like that you could use to prevent psychic driving from working?
No, I wish there was. So first off, Dr. Ewan Cameron is one of the most evil men to ever live. If you haven't heard of him, he was a psychiatrist, a very well-known and well-respected psychiatrist at the Allen Memorial Institute in Ottawa, in Canada. And
Canadians never did anything bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's actually something that blows my mind. It's like they always talk about MK Ultra being like an American thing, not knowing it was in Canada, the UK, and Germany. All three of them. Like they had projects of MK Ultra. Yes, it was the CIA, but they allowed it and they knew what was going on. So Dr. Ewan Cameron was a well-respected psychiatrist who, using brute force psychological techniques, reverted people to an infantile-like state. So, for example, there was this one new mother. She had just had a baby. She had a very mild case of postpartum depression, very mild case. And she was called in by Dr. Ewan Cameron, and he was like, hey, I want to treat you. And she was actually incredibly ecstatic about this. She goes, I just have depression. Like, I can't believe the great Dr. Ewan Cameron wants to work with me. So she comes to his office. They strap her down to a table. They force feed her LSD, give her 30 times the allowed dosage of electroshock therapy, 30 times the allowed dosage. They put her into a coma. As soon as she comes out of the coma, they dose her with LSD again, shock her again. They have messages repeating in the back of her head over and over and over. Weird stuff like, you're not real, you've committed murders, you're an evil person. Weird messages over and over and over and over again for like 30 days. They had another guy that they brought in that just had a panic attack, like one panic, two panic attacks.
Hold on, did they fix her? That fixed her, right? I assume so.
Yeah. No, so that specific lady barely could speak English. She started touching herself in public. She would urinate in public.
Depressed?
Yes, yes, okay. She was. Okay. Yeah, probably way worse. There was another guy that had like 2 panic attacks. They put him in an isolation room for like 45 days, just pure white, no sound. The air is the temperature of his skin. And they did the same thing. They shocked the hell out of him too. They dosed him with LSD. And I could be getting my numbers right, but there were 11 people that Dr. Ewan Cameron did this to. They got together and sued the Allen Memorial Institute, and the government awarded them $750,000 to share from 11 people. $750,000 to share. These guys can't work again. They're completely, not one of them ever held down a job. They couldn't operate in society ever again. And they $750,000 to share. It's pitiful. It's infuriating. But that is, yes, to kind of get back to your main question, Dr. Ewan Cameron, that is just the most brute force way. Just if you have infinite amounts of time with people, you can hold them as long as you want. You can get someone to do anything you want. It's not about that. The real trick is shortening the time. So if I want to fix a problem, if I want to cause dissociation, I want to cause regression, I want you to go back to a kid-like state. I can do that in 5 minutes. There's no reason to keep someone for 30 days. It's just not needed. It's not important. And it almost comes across as sadistic, not as, there was some serious moral issues, not even with the informed consent issue, but with, I'm very sure that Dr. Ewan Cameron knew of better psychological techniques to cause some of these symptoms, and yet it just seemed like he was using them as test dummies and nothing more.
Well, if you want to make an omelet, right? Isn't that the saying? You gotta break a few eggs.
I guess. I mean, these poor people. There's interviews with a couple of them online. Just use the Esterbrooks. Esterbrooks didn't really hurt anyone. I'm not saying he was like a great guy, because he definitely was a little bit narcissistic, but he wasn't ruining people's life forever like Ewan Cameron, or I imagine there's some long-lasting trauma from like Project Midnight Climax and a lot of and obviously Monarch. But something interesting before we get to the last question, just if you're interested in all, because we've talked a lot about multiple personalities and the process of it, there are new ways that are not allowed to be shared. There are new ways of splitting personalities that are very effective. However, if you want to know some of the old ways, Dr. George Esterbrooks wrote a book called Death in the Mind, which is a fiction book. It is a fiction book about World War II and the Nazis, and how hypothetically in this fictional world you would create sleeper agents.
Death in the Mind.
Hypothetically, how you would create sleeper agents.
Okay. And when you say they can't be revealed, like, says who? Like, if you were to reveal one right now, do you wake up dead? Do you get disbarred? Like, what? Like, who's enforcing that?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't get. Probably wouldn't wake up dead, but I would have some legal consequences for sure. I definitely would have some legal consequences. Yeah.
Okay, enough said. I won't press too much. Final question here, I want to like get into Dr. Jolly West a little. We'll save that. I don't know if you're familiar with that name. We'll save that for like a part 2. AI, because we're talking about, so far all the hypnosis we've been kind of describing has been like a person to a person, or in some cases like a person created a thing or a program or a recording and then played it for another person, or maybe on a mass. But now we're in this age of like large language models. And I'm just imagining if you could pattern a large language model off of like Milton Erickson's different phrases, and you went through, I'll just throw some names out there that might feel like Darren Brown, right? Like all the Darren Brown things and all of the Bandler and Grinder sort of philosophies. Could you make a large language model that would just hypnotize people just from them conversing with it unwittingly? Or does it take like a human touch at a certain point?
Sure. I would respond with, are we not hypnotized by social media? Looking at.
Well, I guess to interrupt just a second for that, to answer the premise of it, yes, but social media also has images and audio and video, which large language models can too, but the difference being that in social media, even if you know there's bots out there, you are under the impression that you're reading like your friends and family and circles kind of thoughts and activities, even if they're AI assisted, versus if you open up ChatGPT and start talking to it, it's almost like you're talking to a hypnotist right now, and that like I'm talking to a bot. And even with that in mind, like wittingly knowing I'm talking to artificial language model, could that artificial language model be so skilled in hypnotic language that it would hypnotize me without the use of images and emotions or anything outside of just text? 5 words or less.
That's a good question. So not through text. You can't be hypnotized through text, really. There's a huge amount of people that will disagree with me, but that is people that are a part of the erotic hypnosis fan base, the group, and a lot of them role play over text messages, and so but that is what it is. It's role play. I've not once in my life seen anyone truly hypnotized, at least in a standard clinical sense, through words or through text messages. So that's not going to happen. In order for you to be hypnotized through, like, say, the AI's voice, AI has already gotten to a point where sometimes it's hard to even notice that it's an AI, like through the voice or text to voice. There's been many times where I'll listen to something, I'm like, Joe Rogan really said that? Like, and then it's like, oh wait, no, he didn't. And I think if you know that there's a machine element, it's kind of unlikely. I don't want to say impossible, especially if you are very, very suggestible naturally. But once it becomes human, we already have hypnotic voice tracks, like pre-recorded voice tracks for hypnosis. So once it sounds like a human, I assume it definitely could. The scary thing about AI is the thing that separates a bad hypnotist from a great hypnotist is the ability to pace where you're at. So if I'm a bad hypnotist, I'm just going to read off a script and I'm not going to look at you at all to see if it's working. I'm not going to modify the script. I'm just going to say the script. This is why all the hypnosis studies are BS, because they're all scientists that don't know about hypnosis, just reading the script. There's no human element, which is necessary, because if I notice that I say something along the line, like a certain language pattern, and your blink rate slows down. Blink is how many times you blink per minute is an indicator of stress. And so if I notice that your blink rate has gone down, you're focusing on me intently. This is good. And that means I'm going to use that language pattern more, or you might be ready to just go all the way into trance completely. Bad hypnotists don't really do that. They don't profile the person at all. They don't watch the person. They don't pace the person. AI will get to a point where you can look into a camera and it has immediate recognition of all your facial expressions. It will know that, like, for example, one of the indicators of trance occurring is an increase in lower lip size. So it looks like the lower lip is getting bigger. Really what happens is just the tension from the jaw is releasing, so the lip can kind of puff out a little bit. An AI will get to a point where it can notice that immediately and do the most effective hypnotic induction possible. Is it going to get to a point where it can secretly hypnotize you just off of AI? I don't know. Like we said earlier, before we started recording, I'm not really a tech guy. I'm actually kind of a doofus when it comes to that stuff. But I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, that one seems like a no-brainer, especially in like the Minority Report aspect, where you walk in a mall or whatever the hell the equivalent is, and based on your blink rate and your gait and the elasticity of your skin, which it can tell by LiDAR and like all these different things, it can know, like, okay, after this guy walks 6 more steps, throw him this like Orange Julius ad, and he's like 99% more susceptible than if we were to show it to him over here. So that kind of feels like the direction.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. I don't know much about AI at all, other than it kind of scares me, but I don't know anything about it. So, maybe it'll be great. Maybe it'll be the greatest invention in human history. Who knows? I don't want to make claims on it.
Okay, well, I want to get you out of here. I've got a really quick segment. We'll wrap this up. Let me just play it and I'll explain how it works.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
Okay, and because you mentioned you do have a sensitivity, we're not going to require you to smoke real PCP this time only. It's a one-time exception out of respect for your past. The rules are pretty basic. I'm just going to mention a concept, and you're going to give me a 1 to 10 rating based on how valid or credible you think that is. So I'll start easy. It's usually with Bigfoot. 1 to 10, that Bigfoot is real.
Ooh, 5.
Well, flat Earth theory.
2.
About hollow Earth theory.
4.
How about a human being has stepped foot on the moon in the last 100 years?
7.
How about the Apollo 1969 footage is an accurate portrayal of a human being stepping foot on the moon?
5.
The classical concept of dinosaurs as we learned about them in the, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s.
10.
Fire-breathing flying dragons existed at any point in history.
6.
Demons are real.
10.
Angels are real.
10.
You're biased because you're a freaking devout Catholic, of course. How about this one? This is one of my favorite ones, but I go on Amazon and I buy the top 3 How to Summon a Demon for Dummies, and I read them over a weekend, and on Monday I earnestly start, but I'm not like hurting or killing or doing anything immoral. Like I'm just reading the books and reciting, I don't know, like old Greek papyrus sort of writings. 1 to 10 that I could legitimately summon a demon or somehow damn myself in that process.
Those are 2 complete different things.
Okay, well, let's start with the could I summon a demon using just like direct to print Amazon books?
10.
Okay, and then I'm going to hell for doing so.
Completely dependent on the rest of your life. It's 0. It has no real effect depending on how you live the rest of your life.
Okay, so the basic act of summoning a demon into this realm doesn't necessarily give you a fast pass to hell?
Not a guarantee, no.
Okay, HARP is real weather modification that can create earthquakes.
9.
MK Ultra is being used by government/scientists in the music industry right now.
10.
And then I guess finally, I just want to know time travel. Do you think time travel is possible? 1 to 10.
2.
Okay, a pretty nice variety there. I like the dinosaur answer. Is there anything that we could have talked about today that we didn't get into that we should save for next time? Like any major things that we kind of left on the table?
I mean, behavior profiling is a love of mine as well. I don't know. I find the concept of truth serums fascinating.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about like scopolamine in detail next time we get together too.
Sodium amytal is my favorite. I will leave off with this little story. Sodium amytal. So everyone thought sodium pentothal or pentothal was the true serum, but sodium
True
amytal.
Lies. This is what they inject Arnold with in True Lies. That's how I know about it.
Yeah. But sodium amytal is very similar. It's also a barbiturate and a hypnotic, but it is so funny. The reason it's my favorite is 1, it's used in the process of creating a Manchurian candidate. But also, there is in 1995, there was a guy, I know his name. Yeah, Andres English Howard. And he was accused of strangling his girlfriend to death. And his lawyer was like, no, he didn't do it. And in order to keep his stress down so he looked more innocent, he gave his client, Andres English Howard, a vial of sodium amytal to just make him relax because it's a barbiturate. He just wanted him to calm down. And in front of the court jury, he, without knowing, admitted that he killed his girlfriend, strangled her to death, and exactly why he did it, all the consequences. It is so funny. But yeah, that's a bad lawyer. You got the Dollar General dollar store lawyer, because that was awful. But anyway, no, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, and really quick, I didn't want to interrupt earlier, but here's what I was referring to earlier. I would love for you to look into it in case you find it interesting. It was known as MER-17 during MK Ultra. The real name is, I'm going to butcher it, azaclinol, atacerin, calmaran, fentanyl, and Frenquil. That's what I've heard of it in Psychosan. But this was being purported by the CIA during MK Ultra that if you found, it was kind of like an EpiPen in a way. Like if you suspect you've been dosed by a hallucinogen or a psychedelic, take this and it'll snap you out of it, the same way that you were kind of referring to Xanax a little bit earlier.
Oh,
so
I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah, I don't think I've met anyone that heard about this, and I only know about it because of a weird niche thing that I got into. So wow. There you go, man. I think this one's really interesting. So, all right, we'll wrap this up here. Again, thank you for your time. This was incredibly informative. I like everything we were talking about is like the number one thing that I find the most interesting. I got into NLP when I was like in my early 20s, and that led into mind control stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the path I followed. Yeah.
I hope you had a good time. I hope you'll come back on. Once more, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, on Instagram and YouTube, the Behavioral Decryption Institute is the name of it. And it's just me talking to the camera very informally about some of the techniques that you can use to influence, persuade, and hypnotize people. If you are wanting private coaching on influence, hypnosis, persuasion, you can DM me on Instagram.
And to the audience out there, you just saw us do a full interview about suggestion. You're hearing my voice right now. We're at the end of this interview, and you're going to go on to paranoidamerican.com and buy a bunch of comics because they're some of the best comics you've ever seen and ever will see. So thanks for that.
I heard the only losers refuse to buy stuff from Paranoid American. Only total losers.
And only the smartest of people know that. So the fact that you know that means that you're on like a whole higher level than most people. So
geniuses buy from Paranoid American. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com. Oh, nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain, give you the flight? My plane paper, the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe a language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Matters not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.